All right, welcome. Today, we're building something of a field guide to one of the most complex personalities out there, the narcissist. We're going to use our source material like a map, exploring their inner world piece by piece to really understand what's going on. So let's just jump right in.
Here's our plan for today. We're going to start inside with the inner conflict that really drives them. Then we'll look at the code of power they use to deal with the outside world. From there, we'll get into how they see relationships as basically a type of currency, what happens when you're not useful anymore, and finally, we'll talk about that disruptive aura they tend to leave behind.
You know, to really get a handle on a narcissist, you have to start with their internal moral compass. Our source material suggests it's all defined by this constant battle, or maybe more accurately, a total lack of one that's happening inside their head. And this really nails the fundamental difference. See, for most of us, our conscience is that little voice that kind of keeps us on the straight and narrow. But for the narcissist, that voice is just completely drowned out by a much, much louder one. Pure self-interest. It's not even a fair fight. And self-interest, well, it pretty much wins every single time. And that overwhelming self-interest, it leads directly to this, a really profound sense of entitlement. Like the source says, they genuinely feel that any money they can get their hands on, whether it's through a bribe or just outright theft, is theirs by right. The whole idea of actually earning it through hard work is almost insulting to them. Now, here's the paradox that's right at their core. Despite all the arrogance they might project, our source points to this deep, hollow lack of self-confidence. So how do they deal with it? Well, they project it outward. They'll try to chip away at your own self-trust to create a version of you that's just as insecure as they are. And remember this, because this deep-seated insecurity is the engine that drives so much of their behavior. So how does that internal mindset actually play out in the real world? Well, that brings us right to our second section, their very specific code of power. This brings up a pretty basic question, one our source material has a very direct answer for. Do narcissists actually respect anyone? The answer is yes, but it's got nothing to do with character or morality. It's just a cold calculation of power. They'll respect people who are stronger than them, but only because their usual tactics just won't work on them. But for anyone they see as weaker or more vulnerable, the goal is to trample and manipulate. It's a two-tiered system, and there's no middle ground. And this lack of respect, it bleeds into the very things that hold society together. Commitments, their own word, promises, your time. To them, these are all just annoying obstacles, not sacred bonds. According to the source, this total disregard is one of their most telling traits. Okay, so this transactional way of seeing the world, it naturally applies to the people around them. In our third section, we're going to look at how relationships aren't seen as connections, but more like a form of currency. Our source material is incredibly blunt here. When a narcissist says friend or partner, the hidden meaning is something way more predatory. In their minds, the real labels are prey and victims. This whole philosophy really boils down to a simple, kind of chilling, three-part mantra. Rule number 1 that they live by, no permanent friends. Rule number 2, which logically follows, no permanent enemies either. And the third, final rule that governs absolutely everything, there are only permanent interests. That's it. That's the entire social playbook. Alliances can shift, loyalties are disposable, but that drive to serve their own self-interest, that's the only thing that is ever constant. So what happens when the transaction's over, when you're just not useful anymore? That's what we're getting into in section 4, the aftermath. Look, they'll squeeze every last drop of usefulness out of a person. The end of the road only comes when they're absolutely positive there is nothing left for them to take. The source uses this really harsh phrase, irredeemable waste, which just highlights how cold and disposable the whole relationship is from their side. And what's fascinating is how their perspective totally flips if you figure them out. If you finally see them for who they really are, they don't regret their actions. No, they regret any little bit of kindness they ever showed you. Those breadcrumbs they tossed your way are suddenly seen as a terrible, wasted investment. So for our last section, let's zoom out and look at the wider impact. Our source suggests that a narcissist presence is more than just individual harm. It actually creates this whole atmosphere, what it calls an aura of disorder that can affect everyone and everything around them. They're described as generators of just this immense negative energy. Their very presence is considered actively disruptive. It creates this kind of emotional and psychological static that just destabilizes any environment they're in. And this disturbance apparently shows up in three ways. First, it disrupts the energy of a place itself. Second, it disrupts the energy of the people in that place. And third, and this is the most alarming part, it can actually speed up the decline of someone who is sick or vulnerable. That disruptive presence is seen as actively harmful to someone trying to recover. Which leaves us with this one last really powerful piece of advice from our source. It's not about confronting them or trying to fix them. The ultimate takeaway is defensive. Just create distance. If you can, make yourself, and especially anyone who's vulnerable, disappear from their sight. It's a provocative thought, isn't it, that maybe the real power isn't in fighting back, but in your ability to simply walk away.